Wild animals are often admired for their beauty and strength, which leads many people to want to interact with. Unfortunately, one common way humans try to help, by feeding them, ends up doing more harm than good. Feeding wild animals, even with good intentions, can lead to dangerous consequences for both the animals and humans. Let's look at some real examples of how this seemingly kind act can end in tragedy. Alligators in Mississippi. In Mississippi, 5 alligators were euthanized after it was discovered they were being fed by humans. The people responsible for feeding the alligators were held accountable, but that didn't change the fate of the animals. Once wild animals associate humans with food, they often become dangerous and aggressive, making it impossible for them to live freely. In this case, the authorities had no choice but to put the alligators down. Moose in Alaska. Similarly, in Alaska, a moose had to be euthanized after a woman posted a video showing herself feeding the animal. The moose became too comfortable around humans and lost its fear, which made it a potential threat. This story highlights how our actions, even when well-meaning, can lead to an animal's death. A fox in Grand Teton National Park. At Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, a fox met a similar fate. People had been feeding it, and eventually, the fox lost its natural instinct to avoid humans. Because the fox kept returning to areas with people, officials had to put it down to prevent any possible harm. A coyote in British Columbia. In British Columbia, authorities spent 2 months tracking down a coyote that had started eating human food. Just like the fox, this coyote was a threat because it began to see people as a food source. The coyote was eventually caught and euthanized, another tragic example of what happens when wild animals are fed by humans. The issue with bears. Bears are often victims of human kindness. When tourists feed bears, the animals become reliant on human food and stop searching for their natural sources of nutrition. This not only leads to aggressive behavior, but it also damages their health. Bears that eat human food can suffer from malnutrition and even struggle to digest their normal diet if they switch back. For example, black bears that eat human food spend about 42 fewer days in hibernation than those that don't. This shorter hibernation time speeds up their aging process and affects their overall health. Bears that rely on human food also move less, which leads to obesity. Some black bears can weigh over 400 pounds, with some even reaching 600 pounds, which is much heavier than their natural weight. Feeding wild bears also reduces the diversity of microorganisms in their digestive system, which means they may not be able to properly digest their natural food if they stop eating human food. This makes it difficult for them to return to a healthy diet. Kangaroos in Australia. In Australia, kangaroos are a big tourist attraction, and people often feed them snacks like bananas, carrots, and even chocolate. Unfortunately, kangaroos have very sensitive digestive systems, and these human foods can make them sick. Some tourists even give kangaroos fast food, which is completely unnatural for these animals. As kangaroos become used to eating human food, they stop searching for their natural diet and don't teach their young how to forage for food. This can lead to a decline in the population. Worse, kangaroos that have tasted human food often become aggressive if they aren't fed. They demand more food, and if they don't get it, they may lash out at people. Deer in England. Even deer are affected by human kindness. In England, some deer have died after being fed bread by people. Bread might seem harmless, but it disrupts the deer's metabolism, especially in the winter when they need to slow down to survive. The carbohydrates in bread keep their metabolism running fast, so they end up needing more food than they can find in the wild. This can lead to starvation. Deer that are fed by humans also become more likely to wander into cities or onto roads, increasing the chances of accidents and injuries. Feeding deer can also spread diseases, as they gather in large numbers around food sources left by humans. This creates a perfect environment for diseases to spread, putting the entire population at risk. Wolves and coyotes. Feeding wolves and coyotes can be incredibly dangerous. These animals are naturally afraid of humans, but when they are fed by people, they lose that fear. This leads to more frequent encounters with humans, which can be deadly for both sides. In many cases, wolves and coyotes that get used to human food become a threat to people and have to be put down. In national parks, despite warnings and rules against leaving food out, people still do it. As a result, wolves and coyotes start associating campsites with food, which can lead to more aggressive behavior. Diseases and other problems. Feeding wild animals also increases the risk of spreading diseases. When animals gather around human-provided food, they are more likely to spread diseases like canine distemper, parvovirus, and leptospirosis. Even simple deer feeders can turn into breeding grounds for disease, affecting not only the animals that eat there, but the entire ecosystem. Animals will also eat food that's bad for them, simply because it's available. Deer and moose have been known to die from eating too much corn, which they can't properly digest. Even bighorn sheep have trouble processing human food. Overeating human food can lead to death because the animal's digestive systems are not equipped to handle it. Changes in animal behavior. When wild animals start eating human food, their entire behavior changes. They stop searching for their natural food, which affects the balance of the ecosystem. For example, deer usually spread seeds around as they roam through forests. But when they stay in one place because they're being fed, they stop spreading seeds, which can harm plant life. Animals that crowd around feeders also fight more often, which leads to injuries and death. Even if they survive, the stress of constantly fighting weakens their immune systems, making them more susceptible to diseases. If you truly care about wild animals, the best thing you can do is leave them alone. Feeding them may seem like a kind gesture, but it often leads to their death. Wild animals are capable of finding their own food and surviving on their own. Human food not only makes them sick, but also changes their behavior in ways that put them in danger. So next time you're in a national park or out in the wild, remember, don't feed the animals. It's the best way to keep them healthy and safe.